I find the sauna is similar to driving. It's enough of a tax on your mind that you are sort of somewhat occupied with the task of, in the sauna kind of just staying alive. But it facilitates very good creative conversation. So yeah, we try and fit those in at least kind of once, twice a week and have good discussions there.
Do you have an example? Can you think of an idea that came from sauna time?
The company.
That's a good one.
3, 2, 1,
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Between Two Layers. First episode of 2023. We got Robbie Ferguson with us here, as always, president, co-founder of Immutable X. And today we are joined by special guest Alex Connolly, Chief Technology Officer, CTO, and also co-founder of Immutable X. First time on the Between Two Layers pod. Alex Connolly, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. Super excited to be here.
Big honor. You finally made it. You're officially a part of Immutable X now that you've made it onto the Between Two Layers podcast.
No, definitely. I've enjoyed listening to you and Robbie hash it out all year, and I'm looking forward to being a part of it.
This is a super fun episode. I love doing these kinds of episodes in podcasts, which is a look back at 2022. What were the big milestones? Let's look at what Immutable X achieved over the course of 2022, and then looking ahead at 2023 and what is to come, predictions. You're going to hear it from two of the smartest minds in the space. But before we get to all that, I do have to remind folks, if you are watching this on YouTube, smash that subscribe button. Is that what I'm supposed to say? Hit that subscribe button. If you are listening to this on a podcast app, go ahead and hit follow so you can make sure you get all of the wonderful content coming out of Immutable X moving forward. And with that, let's just start, for folks who maybe don't know you or are less familiar with you, Alex, what's the origin story here? How did you meet Robbie and James and get involved with IMX?
Robbie and I actually met each other at university. There were 3 people who were doing a double degree in law and computer science at the University of Sydney, and we were 2 of them. Right? And this sort of had led to us sitting next to each other in quite a lot of classes and working on some similar things. And this meant that when Robbie was sort of starting to play around with the first blockchain things, I was someone who had a few years of experience in that era, in that technology already. And so it was a really great opportunity for us to actually build something together.
So you both have legal degrees?
We have part of legal degrees.
No, neither of us have legal degrees.
Oh, you dropped out. You both dropped out.
We did.
We both dropped out the same year.
Oh my God. So annoying. Both of you and your impressive Zuckerbergian resumes. What are your favorite memories from some of the early days at Immutable X?
Like certainly some of my favorite memories of the early days is when you're at a startup and it's only really you and a couple of other people in the same room building something really cool. Just so many fun things happen. I think it's such an engaging environment, and you really see what attracts people to want to be a part of those things. I think some of the funny stories, or some of the most fun stories, occurred around the time of the initial launch of Gods Unchained, where we were really sort of going as fast as we could to ship this thing. We were sleeping on the floor of this little office. We were sort of eating at the same restaurants. I knew that something had gone wrong when there was a fast food restaurant right below the office where we were eating 2 meals a day, and they started to remember my name and my order, and that meant that was a bit of a dangerous time. And we were so engrossed, I think, and so like all of us was all into this product to the point where I think we started, even from a little bit of sleep deprivation, right? You're seeing the same people over and over and over. And I think you start making some slightly suboptimal decisions just from lack of sleep at some point. I definitely would recommend sleeping every once in a while. I think we got to the point where we were so sort of like tired at one stage that we'd actually forgotten to even take some things like a pillow or some other things into the office that would have made our lives much easier. We were fully committed at that stage, but I think that it's just like an awesome time of sort of like bonding and like, we didn't even have meetings at that point, right? Everything was just all people in the same room. If someone wanted something, they would sort of lean over the table and ask for it. We had an offsite at the end of 2018 where we sort of came to the conclusion that we needed to start having formal meetings as a company. And up until that point, it was just sort of like everyone having fully merged their minds together. And that was an awesome thing to be a part of.
It's always like a big deal when you like upgrade to like the Google suite. You're not on like your own Gmails anymore or just like poking the person. You're like, oh, we're going to set up a calendar and there's going to be structures to things. So Robbie, I think you have like a philosophy of whoever learns fastest wins. Would you describe your philosophy that way?
I think, a necessary belief to be successful in crypto. Yeah.
Alex, do you have like a core abiding philosophy that guides how you approach your work or Immutable X?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think certainly what the last few years have taught us, I think, whoever learns fastest wins is a great start. What that's really come down to for me, particularly on the product and engineering side of things, is when we think back to the way that things were at the start of 2018. We used to call up people and tell them, try and hire them to come and work on this sort of like NFT game or Web3 game and games platform, and people would laugh at us. That it was so far from sort of like the public consciousness that this was something that people could be interested in work on. And I think that teaches you a lot about sort of like, A, being really resilient, right? There are going to be plenty of people who think you're wrong all the time, right? And B, having the sort of the fortitude to like commit to those things where like, what are the beliefs that you have about the world that are contrarian, but you think that they're true, such as the things that people should own the items that they have in games, right? And making sure that you build towards that thesis. And so like you want to have this big, long, okay, we think this is the way that the world is going to be. And at the same time, I think to be successful, one thing that you also have to maintain is a lot of humility when it comes to the things that you've built. You're going to build some things and they won't be the right product. You're in an early space. It's not just like, okay, we have a really well-defined problem. We just need to take something and optimize it slightly. We need to build a more efficient way for people to do this particular problem. You're doing green fields, new stuff, and that sometimes means you're going to build either the right thing at the wrong time, or something was just like the wrong thing completely. And you're going to have to be able to let those products go. And I think being able to balance that like really strong conviction about the future of the space and the fact that people should own their assets with a lot of humility around the specific product and engineering decisions that you might have taken, that's the philosophy that I try to balance to make sure that I'm always able to like build the things that players and developers actually need at that point. That's been something that I've had to work really, really hard to inculcate in myself.
Let's talk about everything you've built in the last year and beyond, but looking specifically at 2022, maybe let's start with just a rundown. Robbie, I don't know if you want to kick us off. Alex, if you want to kick us off, run us through what 2022 looked like for IMX.
Yeah, every year I feel like we accomplished more than the previous year. I think last year was probably the biggest example of that. We, at the start of the year, raised $200 million US dollars from Temasek, Tencent, and I think that was really allowed us to, A, hire nearly 200 people to triple the company's size and advance our goals of building this one-stop shop for Web3 games and then for everything to be traded as truly ownable digital assets. And we launched our $500 million venture fund to support Web3 games, building high-quality gaming experiences for players. I think is really important. We had huge growth in some of the games on our platforms, but most importantly, I think we kind of went from being this very early stage go-to-market platform where a few people knew about us. It had essentially just been built. And I think at the start of 2022, we had 6 games building on us. We now have well over 100. And all of these games are really meaningful. So I think the stat that I was happiest with last year, and the one that to us speaks the most to signal rather than to noise, is what is the level of funding that games on these ecosystems receive? Because at the end of the day, you can say, hey, we have 300 random scrappy indie games building or games that won't make a difference. But gaming is driven by a power law. The biggest game will have more players and more revenue than the rest combined. The same will go for the second, will have the rest bigger than the third largest, and the long tail combined, and so on and so forth. And so for us, the key stat that came out was Delphi Digital did analysis on all ecosystems funding of the games building on their platforms, and Immutable was the most funded ecosystem out of any L1 or L2 in the world, apart from Ethereum L1, with whom we obviously don't compete. And so that to us was a really big example of going from the start of the year, putting an enormous effort into developing a platform that would help these games the most, be the simplest thing to use, but also investing a lot in actually helping them build and investing in the relationships they're going to be successful was amazing. So I think that was an incredible stat to see. We went from 5th in market share to 1st in market share for Web3 gaming at the same time the category exploded. And so maybe speaking not on Immutable, but the thing I was most impressed with the category in the space overall is that despite the massive change in macro environment, what we've seen is the largest tech investment in the last decade flow into Web3 gaming, in particular as a segment inside crypto. And we've also seen a sort of contingent flow in of talent as well, where some of the best talent from regular game studios have been moving over. Justin Hulog and Riot Games execs, Blizzard execs, all moving into Web3 in order to build experiences that are better for players. So that's what's incredibly exciting for me. All of that is going to be sort of proving itself out over the next 18 months as we see these games go live.
Alex, is there anything you want to touch on specifically on the technical side about what you felt you were able to accomplish or what Immutable X was able to accomplish when it came to developers or anything that really stands out to you?
Yeah, I mean, 2022 was a massive year of growth for us. I think both in terms of the scope and ambition of our product, in terms of what we're actually able to offer the developers that are building on top of our platform, as well as how easy we're able to make things for developers. I think some things that we're really proud of there is just the improvement in, there's a lot of work that goes in behind the scenes to making some of this stuff happen, which doesn't usually get talked about in public, but there's just been amazing work that's been done going from a platform that's supporting 5 or 6 games to a platform that's supporting hundreds and a platform with stronger, more robust products. There's been so much behind the scenes investment in scalability, in reliability, in improving the developer experience. We've had almost decent chunks of our code be significantly uplifted in that time. And all of that is while adding a whole bunch of cool new features to our platform. And I think there's actually, when we start talking about 2023, there's actually a lot of investment that's been made in 2022, which is going to pay off in feature terms in 2023. And we'll talk about some of the stuff that I'm excited about a little bit later.
Yeah, we'll definitely have to get into that. I'm curious, Robbie highlighted what it sounds like he's proudest of, which is looking at how much investment went into games building and partner ecosystems in IMX. Do you have something you look back on in 2022 and you're like, this is what I'm proudest of? This is what I tell my mom over Christmas or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, I mean, I think transaction growth is something that we're really proud of. Right, we're just simply servicing far more NFT trades than we were even this time last year. Right, so even in a more favorable market, we're doing close to 1,000% more trades, user to user NFT transactions than we were at the same time. Right, I think and we've done that period of growth in a time where the market has been trending in the other direction. And we've been able to support millions and millions of NFT trades, I think, substantially higher than many other blockchains or even most other blockchains. We really pride ourselves on particularly that sort of segment of the market where we're talking about actually unlocking not, hey, a $200,000 Bored Ape being moved between 2 people, but hey, this is a card that's being traded for $1. This is a skin that's being traded for $5. This is a game that's being traded for $15. Those types of transactions, we saw far more actual transactions between actual players. More than 1.5 million people now own assets on Immutable X, and those users have been able to trade at huge scale, really reliably, with a system that we think offers one of the best experiences in Web3 gaming. That is something that I'm incredibly proud of. Actually having the product that we started building in 2021 over the course of 2022 become accessible to so many more people, trading so many more assets. That's something that we're incredibly proud of.
Was there a biggest challenge to either of you would say for 2022?
I think one thing that was definitely a challenge was obviously overall market conditions. Right? I think we went very quickly from a point where it was extremely easy to get funding for a project and for that project to sort of immediately launch an NFT pre-sale and sell out or go and have a ready-made community, to one where very quickly the tap turned off on a lot of that stuff. Which meant that projects had to change their strategy. We had to change our strategy as far as servicing those projects. I think to some extent that played into our hands when it came to the long-term theses we have about the space. And I spoke about this before, right? Having the conviction that, hey, it's going to be actual games that are fun to play as opposed to sort of very scarcity, luxury-driven asset collections that really stand the test of time.
Because we had people coming to us early last year, Alex, as you say, wanting us to help them build art projects or pre-sale projects, and we would turn them away. We would say, unless you're building a game that we think can grow over time, have a retained user base, it's not in our strategy to help you build. Of course, it is technologically, our platform is always available to use, but in terms of where we put our efforts, from day one, we've been focused on long-term games. And for a while, that was quite painful. All the most successful and hyped up projects were these luxury PFP projects or art collectibles. But I think very much that was the strategy that was correct, given what we've seen over the long term, which has been the only thing that will really make an order of magnitude difference become mainstream are products that everyday people want to use rather than speculatively invest in. There will always be a category for this, and I have nothing against digital art. I think it's a brilliant use case of NFTs. But where we're fundamentally interested is how do we make economies that are real and service players with them? So I just kind of doubling down on what Alex said.
We've talked about that a bit on the podcast before, Robbie, but it is the thing that I think is so impressive about you guys is that super laser focus, refuse to be distracted by whatever shiny thing is over here, or whatever shiny thing is over there. It's like we are building for games. We know what our why is, and we are not going to deviate from that. Speaking of games, any favorite games of 2022? Robbie, I know you don't play as many. You're like, I will fall into the addiction spiral of not being able to stop playing games. But if you have a favorite you want to call out, and then Alex, a favorite game of 2022 for you?
Historically, I've been a really big first-person shooter game player. I've played a lot, many like Team Fortress, Counter-Strike, Valorant, like you name it. I've probably played it a lot. This year, one thing that I found really interesting, or at least a little bit frustrating, is when you can play games less and you're playing first-person shooters, your aim gets substantially worse. And for someone who's very competitive like me, that can be really frustrating. I actually spent a lot of time this year playing more strategy-oriented games, right? So like playing some like Paradox games, playing obviously Civilization, an old favorite. I played a lot of Crusader Kings 3. Like just generally those types of games were sort of a big genre for me this year that I hadn't really explored before. Not a lot of them came out this year, but I think that was a new experience for me that I found less frustrating.
I don't even know about Crusader Kings, Alex.
Less frustrating than the shooter games that are still, I think, my big thing.
So fun trivia point about Alex. I think at age 11, he had the most read economic papers. He was writing like theses on the economy in Team Fortress 2. Correct me if that's wrong, Alex. It was economy stuff, right?
I think I was about 13. I think I was about 13, but
big difference. I'm sorry, you weren't writing. Wait, what was the other people were reading the papers you were writing at 13, breaking down the economy of a game?
Yeah, so one of the first big games to have an economy, sort of like Team Fortress 2, with HAT and in-game item trading. I used to spend a lot of time writing sort of like long-form content for like pricing websites or for sort of like websites that would analyze the TF2 economy to sort of, talk about the relationships between keys and refined metal and different unusual hats and sort of, I think it was a fairly nerdy thing to be doing as a 13-year-old, I'll say, but it definitely set me up for like a really strong belief over the long term that trading items in video games was something that really matters a lot to lots of different people, and that doing it well with better technology, there were just so many things that I experienced during that time that I thought could be done way better. And I think that's part of the overall story of Immutable.
Damn, that's an awesome story. Nerds rule the world. With every passing day, nerds just grow in power. Like the power ups, we're just vibrating. That's really funny and amazing. Well, let's turn and look at 2023 and what's to come. We've obviously started to tease some of this. Maybe we'll start 2023 big predictions. What do you got, Robbie or Alex? Actually, you guys will interrupt each other because there's a lag. So Robbie, we'll start with you.
I think first big prediction is we'll have a Web3 game with a million players. It will be a small number for mainstream games, but it'll be a very significant number for Web3. And it will prove out, I think, that sustainable economies can be built and better monetization can be built with Web3 and will be an anchor point for many things. We may see beyond that, but I think that's pretty safe to assume based on what's going to be going live this year. I think the second thing is, without being a crystal ball, I think we'll see a pretty sideways market. I think macro conditions are extremely bearish with interest rates. What this creates, though, I think is a lot of quiet space for people to build meaningful projects and products. Majority of progress in crypto occurs in the 2-year period after a massive bull run, where the capital has been invested. There's been $18 billion invested in Web3 games. The talent has moved over. The games have been worked on anywhere between, at the most recent, 6 months to, at the longest, 2 years. Games like Illuvium, or even some slightly more OG projects like Gods Unchained. All of these are going to be start to go live over the next 6, 12, 18 months. So I think those are my two sort of big predictions. I think we'll see more regulation. I think that's why it's essential to have a very clear view of what, the value you're bringing to players and utility is. If you're doing speculative-based projects, if you're doing projects that are just moving money around, I think it's going to be a much more limited and much more dangerous game to be playing in crypto. But I also think it means we need to have a very strong view on what are essential for players and what's essential for ownership of their assets and decentralization in order to make sure we don't go down the wrong paths, the paths that we saw suffered numerous times due to the faults of centralization or the faults of a lack of transparency in these processes. So I think all probably good trends. Obviously, regulation can go the other way. It can be helpful in some doses. I think it can root out a lot of bad actors in the industry. But those would be my major predictions for 23.
Do you have any specific games that you think are in the running for that million player base?
I think there's honestly at least 10 building on Immutable today. Obviously, I'm going to selfishly point to our own ecosystem, but I think there are, a huge amount of ones. I think, Invu already has 1 million daily active players, and they're switching the majority of their assets to be IMX-based assets. So I think you have a pretty high likelihood one there.
Alex, I want to get your general predictions in a minute as well, but touching on what Robbie's talking about and something you were talking about earlier, which is just like the transaction volume went up precipitously in 2022. And I know, as Robbie's mentioning, a bunch of big games coming out. I think at one point, Robbie, you had said like 3 AAA games coming out in like the first quarter. You can correct me if that's imprecise at this point, but
that's absolutely accurate.
And you guys are number one, as you said, in blockchain or Web3 gaming at this point. Like, do you hear that, Alex, ever and go like, oh my God, like the pressure or the stress of what that means from a technical perspective to carry that load?
Honestly, I think it's something that we're incredibly excited about. Having the opportunity to work with the best games in the space. I think I agree with all of Robbie's predictions. I think there's one thing I'd add, which is I think 2023 will be the year where we start seeing some of the actual experience of blockchain games substantially improve from an infrastructure and from a sort of like base layer perspective. Sure, right? So that's things like on-ramps, things like wallets, right? Things like payments infrastructure, things like order sharing and liquidity, things like how developers mint assets. All those tools are going to start to mature. There's lots of the things that we're working on, and we're super excited about the way that is going to improve. And I think the contribution that we see that we can make from a product and engineering perspective is, hey, all these games are going to come to market, and we think these games have huge potential in terms of their game design, in terms of their ability to like market successfully, in terms of their ability to attract these players. We see it as like it's a responsibility, but it's also a huge opportunity. I would hate to have to rely on sort of like external parties to make the fundamental platform pieces that are going to help these games succeed. At Immutable, we're so excited about, I guess, having that responsibility to build the infrastructure that enables those games to have the success that we know that we can have, and that's our big goal, right? We think that users who are using Web3 games today are going to be blown away by the like year-on-year experience that they're going to be able to have at the end of 2023 when they look at the experience of onboarding into Web3, making initial purchases, selling those purchases, having those assets orders be distributed across many marketplaces. We think that people are going to be blown away by the experience we're able to create by the end of 2023.
Say a little more on maybe the wallet piece. I'd be curious what advancements or improvements you see there that you're excited about, maybe across 2023, maybe in a couple years. Yeah,
I mean, I think there's a couple of improvements that we're super excited about. I think the first one is improvements to onboarding, right? So the gap that it takes for users to actually come into the space at the moment, I think at the moment what we have is not good enough, right? And I think that actually at the moment people are being forced to choose between either very cumbersome onboarding experiences, so the ones that you see with browser extension wallets like MetaMask, users having to remember seed phrases, write things down on pieces of paper, lock things in safes. That's very confusing to your average gamer who just wants to sort of try the game out. They're not even sure if they want to play yet. They're just trying it out. Or people are using fully custodial, fully back-end wallets. Those have advantages for like a short period of time, right? But they also can compromise some of the core value propositions of Web3. I think something that we're really excited about in the wallet space is the creation of non-custodial wallet types, whether it's through sort of like multi-party computation wallets or account abstraction, smart contract wallets, where you can see wallets which give you sort of a much smoother onboarding and transactional experience, right? While also not meaning that users have to give their keys to a central custodian. We also just think there's ways to just clean up the experience. So a lot of games involve sort of actions like minting assets, purchasing assets, listing your assets, or canceling your listings, crafting your assets together. All of those like core flows that at the moment people will display very generic transaction UI for. Sometimes there will be a very generic transaction that you just have to give the user sort of something that's quite sort of raw and basic. But if we know that that's a crafting transaction, we think there are lots of ways that wallets can help users be like, oh, what I'm doing here is I'm confirming turning my 3 golden golems into 1 diamond golem. That's something that can players are actually have no problem with. And I think making that wallet experience more contextual, more dialed into the actual needs and wants of gamers, something where, when you see it as a gamer who doesn't really understand the technicals of what's going on under the hood, you're like, oh, of course I'm getting this pop-up that's telling me to confirm this. That makes sense. I'm sending you $10. It's like an Apple Pay pop-up. Like getting to that stage, that will be a huge milestone for Web3 wallets.
Do you want to say something, Robbie?
I was just going to add a few more predictions. Yeah.
Go.
I think first thing, I'll just power through these. We're going to see a shift away from poor token designs and token infrastructure. I think FTX and the follow around FTT is going to demand a higher level of diligence around real value propositions, clear governance, sort of clear allocations and of tokens to different shareholders, and understanding of the liabilities of the underlying business models. I think the second thing we'll see is a massive shift away from alternative L1s. We constantly see zigzags here. Every time Ethereum has a bull run and becomes congested, it creates cannon fodder or justifications for new L1s as alternatives to be created. And we saw this most recently with Aptos and Sweep. It's a very attractive proposition for VCs. They get to own a significant pile of something which in most cases is immediately up 2 or 3 times. In bull runs, it's up significant amounts. They're liquid and can be sold. And they have fiduciary duties often to sell them at the top, given the valuations that they have. What we're seeing is a solution to this paradox. L2s have changed so that you no longer have to have the trade-off of network effects in order to scale by building on Ethereum itself. And of course, fundamentally the work we're doing is all around infrastructure liquidity, around, cross roll-up liquidity, around cross order book or cross marketplace liquidity, which we're already seeing double the amount of trades, because half the time that an order is created in one instance, it's filled somewhere else, which is otherwise orders that would not be matched by the traditional understanding of like moats or fulfilling orders in Web3, which is super exciting. It brings a ton more volume to marketplaces and a ton better liquidity for end players, and will only improve as the number of trading venues increase, which is in-game marketplaces. I think the next thing we're going to see is a shift where a lot of companies die this year. Based on sort of a lack of cash runway, a lack of revenues, we'll see a lot of consolidation. And I think not quite as much as we'll expect. I think a lot of the technology that has been built is probably competing or fairly fungible, and most of the consolidation will be acqui-hires. There'll be a couple of strategic acquisitions where you're buying a user base or you're buying the technology or product itself, but in most cases, it's going to be talent-based consolidation. I don't think we'll see particularly large M&A. We've never seen this in Web3. Maybe we'll see 1 or 2 examples this year. We're going to see a massive shift away from custodial technology and centralized infrastructure. Obviously, it will have a place, but I think that place is increasingly proving to either be a very early onboarding, and the technology to do this in a non-custodial manner is continuously improving. And second is just facilitating trading for mainstream customers, where the use case is totally different to owning your assets. It's, I would like to buy Bitcoin, or I would like to buy Ethereum, and that is really a different value proposition. So I think we'll see that to continue, but with much more regulation and probably consolidation to major trusted players who can prove backing, etc. Coinbase, Binance, whoever is going to be able to win those games. We're also going to see a shift away from custodial or centralized bridges. We already have $4.2 billion in the last 2 years lost of customer funds from bridges. I won't go through all the names. There's a lot of them, but fundamentally, the ability to share liquidity is essential, but it should not come at the cost of security. I think also in the venture landscape, we'll see a couple of things. I don't expect to see the same level of investment I think in mid-stage rounds. I think we'll see polarization to still a lot of early stage stuff. There's over $300 billion in VC funds right now in dry powder that must get deployed in the next 4 years. But I don't think we'll see it even in the first half of this year. I think we'll start to see it pick up in the second half. I think valuations will broadly come down, early stage in particular. For later stage rounds, there's going to be a much higher emphasis on due diligence and growth-based companies which have their governance in order. I think governance is going to be, cool again, and I think that's a very good thing, particularly for crypto. I think it's going to mean that credible companies who have done things right since day one, who have done things in a compliant manner, who are going to be on the broadly better side of regulation that is going to be coming in, will do well. And a lot of other companies may struggle to find financing. And the final thing is AI is going to radically change cost structures for games and entertainment. So one of my favorite business philosophies is really there's only two meaningful things you can do in business. You can add a zero or you can take away a zero. You can add a zero in terms of making 10 times more revenue by offering a lot more value, or you can take away a zero by making a cost go away. And what AI is going to do en masse is make costs go away. We've already seen huge displacement of artists, and I'm not saying it's a good thing, but it's an inevitable trend. And we'll obviously see continuance of provenance-based art and art that's meaningful to humans, but all of the commodity art that we see in games, 3D assets, 2D illustrations, rendering of 3D models. We just saw OpenAI's latest GAN where you can actually create 3D assets based on prompts. And we're going to see over the next 5 years, the costs of the entertainment industry, particularly for gaming, basically be zeroed, where it is far cheaper for someone to create numerous AAA assets and to do so dynamically and often localized in ways that would be much better for the diversity and cost structure of games emerging. All of this stuff, particularly that AI trend, really benefits Web3. I think there was a take that AI is going to be the app layer and Web3 will be the infrastructure layer of the future. And I couldn't agree more with that. What is most important is how is value organized and traded. That will be Web3. That will be digital ownership. But ultimately, IP will die and all content will be created by AI. And the principle of business is commoditize your complements. The fundamental complementary good to games is the cost of building the games themselves. And we're going to see that go down drastically over the next 2 years.
Wow, so much there. RIP to all the Bahamian-based companies with no boards that just got roasted in that bit. The AI thing is fascinating. Are there ways that clearly, but you guys at IMX are looking in the short term to start incorporating more AI into what you're doing?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, in our the Immutable Studios, it will be a core part of how we already use it to do early drafts of cards in Goods Unchained before it's kind of finalized by an artist. So yeah, I mean, I think the biggest and earliest will be costs. I think there's really cool things you can do with AI-based NPC behavior. My other assumption is that a lot of sort of skill-gated games will be botted to infinity by AI as it takes on, there's only a few games that humans can be truly better than AI at, and those last sort of bastions will go away over the next few years as well.
What do you think of this move? And I think of like Altered State Machine that's doing this, where, you have these AI brains that I own, that's an NFT that I can train up and I can put it in my soccer player and I can put it in my guitarist in whatever video, I don't know. But is that a big trend you see picking up?
I think we'll see plenty of games where AI is leveraged as a brand new game mechanic. And the trend we see in mobile games is people want to participate in the metagame without actually having to play around a lot. We see, even Guild of Guardians is going to have a mode where you can play and you can kind of be on autoplay, and the game is really around trading and the meta. Auto battlers followed this trend where you're not actually doing a lot apart from like deck selection. It facilitates multitasking. It's very mobile friendly and also friendly to sort of people who don't have the fast switch muscle fighters that top League of Legends players do. I think that will be a natural kind of addendum to that trend, which is AI-driven behavior and sort of trading of those. I don't think we'll see innovations in AI because of that necessarily.
Alex, before I turn some of the fun questions onto you, anything you want to say around this or AI and final words on what you see coming in 2023?
Sure. I mean, I think what we do have to look forward to is, and through AI and through just generally the amount of investment that's been poured into Web3 games, is the proliferation of really high quality content. I think we've been in a world where I think a lot of Web3 games to date have been sort of mostly, get involved now and the game will be there at some point in the future and it will be very exciting when it's here. I think for the first time this year, we're going to really start to see a large number of games that are at least in beta or have some playable components come to light. I think AI may be able to assist in accelerating some of those timelines, but I think even beyond just the purview of AI, it's a timing thing. Games take a while to build. I think when you see games that people are promising to build in 3, 4, 6 months, probably not going to actually happen. What we actually are going to be seeing in 2023 is sort of the overall ecosystem reaping the rewards of the people who have been more heads down, building, less distracted, people who are going to be shipping content to actual players. And that's going to be super exciting because I think, will all Web3 games be successful? Absolutely not. This is I think we're now sort of getting to the point where games are going to have some of the technological enablement, some of the game design patterns are going to start to exist, where people will start to figure out and experiment with what actually can work at scale, sustainably and economically. We are really looking forward to that. And I think we'll have enough games this year to start getting some signal on, hey, what do the next 3 years beyond that of Web3 games look like?
Okay, well, we're going to wrap with some fun questions here that are some audience favorites. They always depress me because everyone's so hardcore. But Alex, what is your morning routine?
Okay, good question. I would say my morning routine, I don't think it's anything super exciting. I wake up usually, I think, between 5 and 5:30, so I wake up fairly early. That's actually not something that is like I've made a change to. I think I've always just been like a fairly early riser, which is great. I don't even set an alarm. And then I will do probably a little bit of actually, I'll do a little bit of work. It's actually a time where I can actually do some things without anyone. There's no one else awake to sort of email me or to distract me. Then I'll go to the gym. I don't eat breakfast, so I'll go to the gym, train, and then head into the office. I think I have a fairly standard morning routine. The one thing I'll say is definitely a characteristic is, I really have to get exercise in the morning. Right? I feel much better for the day. I'm not one of those people. I'm really envious of people who are like able to go and motivate themselves to go to the gym at night and things like that. I definitely just get tired and I do not want to do it. So first thing in the morning or nothing for me.
I'm envious of people who do it first thing in the morning. My energy waves come late afternoon or night is when I want to work out, and I wish I was a morning exerciser. So you guys sometimes go to the gym together, right? You go to the boxing gym or sauna together?
We go to the gym together every day, every morning.
I was going to say, I think it's a really cool thing, by the way, to be able to do that. I think actually having, obviously we spend a lot of time together. I think some people will be like, hey, why do you want to spend even more time together outside of work with our other co-founder, James? I mean, actually, a lot of that comes from the fact of having a space where it is mostly about things that aren't work and where you can be friendly with each other. And we sort of have a no work talk rule, and we can sort of make things happen where we actually are just there to exercise and to decompress.
It's often adjacent. It's often, we have different phases. So we have like proper no wallet, which is like nothing remotely close. And I think that's important for sometimes to switch off. Most of the time it would be like adjacent work, which is I think where you get the best creative discussions, but it's not, okay, how do we operate some management principle better? It's not how we make some kind of day-to-day tactical decision. It's, okay, what are the big trends we're seeing? What ideas we can do that are more creative? And I think that's probably where the most valuable stuff comes from. Often those discussions come when we're in the sauna. I find the sauna is similar to driving. It's enough of a tax on your mind that you are sort of somewhat occupied with the task of, in the sauna kind of just staying alive. Driving, it's kind of going through with this autonomic activity, but it facilitates very good creative conversation. So yeah, we try and fit those in at least kind of once, twice a week and have good discussions there. Do
you have an example? Can you think of an idea that came from sauna time?
The company.
That's a good one.
Yeah. Back in 2017, we were discussing like owning games items inside of a sauna, and that's when we decided to build Etherbots and start everything. Yeah.
Alex, what time do you go to bed? If you wake up at between 5 and 5:30, what time are you going to bed at night?
I'll go to bed usually between, I'd say probably close to midnight pretty consistently. I think I sleep pretty consistently on the schedule of like somewhere between 11 and 12 and somewhere between 5 and 6.
Alex requires no sleep, which I'm actually very envious of.
I'm so envious of that.
He can function very well on 5.5. Yeah.
All right. And final question, 1, 2, 3 book recommendations.
Good question. I'm going to say The Three Body Problem, like classic science fiction translated from Chinese. But I'll make my specific recommendation. I think a lot of people read the book, and the first book is interesting. The second book is by far my favorite of the trilogy, and I really strongly recommend make sure you don't stop after the first book. The second book really is one of my favorite books, I think, of all time.
Love it. Alex, thank you so much for joining Between Two Layers.
Awesome. Thank you very much for having me.